All right, so this is the presentation on Bonnie or Sherk and the question and answer and discussion period with Tanya Zimbardo. So it's fabulous. Lots of questions, but let's look at the audience and see who has questions. You can raise your hands or you can put it in the chat. Manoush and I will both be looking, and Tanya, for who has their hands up. One thing, Tanya, I was really interested in was how did you find all of these materials? I mean, it was a beautiful, incredible archive. I know you mentioned a little bit about it when I saw you at the exhibit, but perhaps you could speak a little more on that.
Sure. So I have, sort of had the honor of working with a sort of volunteer group led by a living library. And I should also say Bonnie in 1992 founded a nonprofit called Life Frames, Inc., which a living library is a subsidiary of. And that sort of a core group from that team, as well as some others who knew Bonnie, have since she passed been, sort of thinking about sort of next steps, including, for example, a university, but right in the more immediate was just trying to help with inventorying. Board president and close friend Robert Kronquist had brought Bonnie's archive from New York. She was bi-coastal to San Francisco, and then so sort of that was already underway. And when this exhibition came to be, while there are definitely certain pieces documented in various archives, including SF MoMA's library, there's no question that the sort of the bulk of both artworks and her own documentation is Bonnie's sort of personally held archive. And so with support from her family, we were able to propose to both do a show and a publication, and to put resources. We also had some wonderful interns with it working with us for this project, to not only continue inventory work, but really to sort of think about the sort of links between different materials. And so there were things that I knew of, like I knew of the digitized films because of our conversations, but a number of the works on paper I hadn't seen in person prior, and there's many more, I should note, than what's in this presentation here today. I took as much as sort of cues from, how Bonnie had shown things, in particular, a living library. But I think there were other moments where it was just really amazing to be able to discover some of the things she had held on to that might point to what a project was. Not pictured here was a performance that she had done, sort of performances and installations in both New York and San Francisco, where she's this character of sort of Miss Liberty. So we found the flag. We didn't show the shoes. We showed the crown. We showed the wand. Some great photos. The press release has a lot of information. So sometimes it was sort of looking at what were some of the stories that's material told. When I had shown portable parks at SF MoMA, Bonnie had a video document of how she liked to represent it, which had integrated photography as part of that. But we found these really wonderful proposals that she and Howard Levine had made, these drawings on photos. And so that kind of discovery I thought was really important as part of this process. And then there were things I knew I was looking for, like artist books I had talked with Bonnie about. The archives are being temporarily stored here in San Francisco. So we are, as we move forward from this exhibition, looking at occasions where we can highlight the catalog, where ideally this is a show that is available in a version to tour, but also just wanting to be known that, there are works that the Living Library team can lend, pending lead time, and that I know how important also artists and members of this group are in writing and curating, and also recommending to people you may be working with, as well as roles as educators, just to think of Bonnie and to think of, the sort of very resonant work she did across performance to her work as a nonprofit founder.
I see a question in the chat from Bonnie. Maybe Bonnie, you'd like to ask your question? Do you know if there's?
Sure, I can do that.
Go ahead, Bonnie.
Okay. Yes, I worked at the Bernal Heights Living Library School location, 2007, 2008. I think it was called Universidad School then. Anyways, I was just wondering, well, two things. I do have a lot of pictures that I took of the kids from that time. I guess they're already as an archive, but that's the first thing. If those, there's anything for me to give them. And
yeah, no, I'd be happy to connect with you on behalf of the sort of Life Frames Inc. Living Library staff who are, in this moment are stewarding her archives, because there's definitely, sometimes some material that made it into, either digital, physical, into Bonnie's archive, but a lot of it was obviously what she generated. So anything else would be great to have.
Yeah, and then I can just get hold of you through.
I'll
figure it out.
Yeah, I can hear. I'm just going to put it in the chat.
Sure. Yes.
Or I can do it at the end.
Also, then if you could put in the chat any other events that are going to be linked with the exhibit.
Sure. Just noting that I think for the events that Fort Mason is organizing, Fort Mason Art is the best, and the exhibition page place to look in terms of March 9th is our closing symposium, but the details of the different panels that people can either do all or choose which ones to go to. We'll also then be linking to some of these other sort of offsite projects. So fortmason.org, or wait, maybe it's not with the WW, sorry, Frank. If you could.
Look it up.
And then Night of Ideas. There is a KQED link also. If you look up 2024, you'll see the March 2nd program. Similar title to this. And
oh, great. Thank you, Fran.
It's a larger event of many different programs. Elizabeth Beard from Circuit Network has organized a panel that I will be on, as well as Terry Cohn is here, Rio Yanez, and Judy Goldhaft. Judy, a Planet Drum recently, as many, or some of you may know, had a Planet Drum had an anniversary show at the library. And Judy had been part of the Reinhabitory Theater, which was one of the residents at the farm. So looking forward to that conversation. And this is at 9:30.
Let's see, we could actually put up some of this information.
I can send it to you in an email if it's possible to.
Right, and then we could post it on the WEED website too.
Yeah, no, thank you. And then there's one that I don't have the hyperlink, but is the Media Burn Chicago webinar, which is on February 22nd. And I'll be joined with Steve Side from the sort of a major video curator, expert on early video, and is the former video curator at the Berkeley Art Museum Pacific Film Archive.
Oh, excellent. Okay.
Yeah. And then March 9th is the closing symposium. And then a living library will be creating some Eventbrite links for these sort of off-site projects that will also be co-presenting. The Bernal Walk one can do sort of on your own, but it's really great to have Luke's perspective if you're able to join us that day.
Thank you so much.
Let's see, we have someone from, let's see, Kamala. Would you like to give your question?
I just wanted to say thank you, and I had not introduced myself earlier, and so I put it in the chat now, and it sort of stood out. But I really resonate with a lot of this work, and it had not been familiar with it. Doing land art here in San Antonio and also in Kansas myself, and also yeah, and I had originally come to Weed with an article on environmental justice poetics, and I just wanted to mention that my book about that is now available. So if I think some people here might be interested, Chicana and South Asian women's work. So thank you so much for.
Yeah, no, thank you. You know, and it's environmental justice and food justice, you know, has been important in terms of also continuing to shape the work and the conversation around a number of projects, especially here in the Bay Area. A living library is now in dialogue with a number of different groups, whether they're community garden groups or other sort of ones working with schools. And so it was definitely an important part of Bonnie's thinking of a living library. It was also these sort of layers of history and very close work that she was doing sort of with communities there.
I felt that. Yes, thank you. Maybe we can connect further. I'll put a link in the chat.
Thanks.
As Tanya suggested, anybody who knew Bonnie or has an anecdote, or perhaps Frank would like to share? Susan, you were an old friend of Bonnie's. Say a few words. Can't hear.
Okay, I just turned it on. I miss her. I miss her and all her hats. Every time we met, she had a different hat on. She had a lot of hats. I saw her show at the Venice Biennale. You know, that it was, you know, sort of format of all pictures and frames, you know, in a grid on the wall. But it was nice to see her included in that format. And yeah, we had a lot of, you know, friends and ideas in common. And you know, I really, you know, I appreciated her safetyness. And she yeah, she was always fun. Not always fun. Sometimes she got dark, but that's okay. I get dark. So yeah, I don't have any particular anecdote to share, but I'm looking forward to seeing the show. And thank you, Tanya, for your presentation.
Thank you, Susan. Were you in a show with her at San Jose State? Do I have that correct?
It's possible. We were in
In the
several different
90s.
shows
Yeah.
together.
Yeah.
We were in a show in Cincinnati and in Washington, D.C.
Mhm.
and I can't remember every place. I got old. It's like amazing that, but that's and that happens. So yeah, we were, you know, there was a circuit of interest, you know, in environmental art and community-based gardening, you know, interactive community gardens and involving the work. I recognized a lot of several people that you didn't, that one photo you had with Joe Hansen and Bonnie. Suzanne Lacey was also in that photo.
Right.
And
Priscilla Burge and
yeah, that was a great photo.
I think
I
Robert.
hope- If it's in the show,
Anderson,
I
yeah.
hope I can take a picture of the picture.
Yes,
Oh,
we'd
yeah.
love
So-
that for the Weed Archives as a copy of that.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it's a great picture.
Lynn Hirschman, I'll note, self-published a wonderful book about the floating museum, which was, I should note, the kind of her artist-run project that was founded at the same sort of era of the farm and went to 78. So not a physical venue, but was taking over different sites. And so that was a collaboration with Lynn, the Floating Museum, as the presenter, and then working with Joe and Pat on organizing that event or series of events.
Joe was a good friend too.
Yeah.
Let's see, maybe people just raise their hand if they have a question or a thought. I did want to get a little more clarity about when the symposium is going to be on the 9th. And we talked about, kind of hosting, you're going to host a walkthrough that members could come to and.
Sure. So happy to connect on sort of the time. I know a number of Weed members have seen the exhibition, but we would love if you'd like to come back for the symposium. It's the final weekend of the show is March 9th and 10th. So I believe that it'll be starting around noon, 12:30. And so, would be happy to, let's say, meet at, like 11:30 or 11, depending on sort of what makes sense with the group there. And this is, sort of open. But I think that, the event itself may go later than the gallery hours that day. There also will be on the 10th, the outside garden project will have a sort of dismantling event of that project, like these amazing mushroom logs that people can take from that. And then I think the final workshops from Hummingbird Farm as part of that project.
Right. I think, let's see, Therese LaHaye has her hand up.
I love the collage proposals.
Mm-hmm.
So in the world of AutoCAD and Revit and Photoshop and Illustrator, just to see those cityscapes with the like fruit collaged into them, they're so alive and inspiring. And if I was reviewing proposals, I would just be in love with the tactility and the imagination of those images. And a couple of questions. One is at the Bryant Park Dewey Decimal System garden relationship. Can you describe an example of one of how the decimal system would be expressed in the garden? And was there a back and forth between the garden and the library?
I'm trying to see if I can find, because I realized I didn't have it in my slideshow, just a picture that maybe Bonnie posted. Okay. Now this may not be so easy to Yeah, sorry, I would need a better link, but I'm just going to put this in the chat. Sort of the ideas of different. Okay, sorry, the paste is not working. There we go. The sort of ideas of sort of forms of knowledge from sort of categories, whether it's sort of mathematics or let's see, others that she had here, and literature, and that the idea was that there would be programming that would also link it with sort of resources, and that there was also technology that could then link it with the libraries. So it was very much the idea of sort of taking an idea of what's inside, outside, and putting it on the landscape. And later, Bonnie, one of the pieces we're showing in the exhibition is of a proposal she had made for the Civic Center here in San Francisco, which is also one of these sort of Beaux-Arts gardens. And thinking of, in that case, sort of multicultural diversity of the Bay Area, and this kind of idea of a that, for example, a proposal for this Assyrian garden, thinking of the kind of history of libraries, as well as that there could be sort of direct programming in relationship to sort of groups coming into that place.
Okay, yeah, thank you for that link. And also, we see Bonnie in these couture gowns, like shoveling dirt and under freeway overpasses and in cages. And then Susan said that she had this whole collection of hats. So she was obviously really into fashion. And can you talk a little bit about that relationship between, this physical work and gardening and couture?
Yeah, I mean, I don't know whether or not it was couture, but I would say that, her early works, her in the snow job piece, and also Sitting Still, she's wearing the same gown. I know some of her peers, like Linda Montano, wore like their prom dress, sort of a kind of fancy attire in that era. And I think there is a definite sort of contrast being played up of sort of about the kind of the garbage strewn area, that, but also I think, Bonnie had, I mean, this is my own read on it, also had come from, had studied under artists who were associated with Fluxus. And so there was a kind of more formal, like, now I'm doing a performance and this is maybe what one would wear. And so, I mean, there's no question, it's not like people showed up in those outfits to art events at that time, but I think there is a sort of inhabiting the role of a woman, of also a performer in those. And as part of, I think, especially with Snow Job, part of a kind of media savvy way of thinking of that kind of occasion that was, where she's talking to the media and really honing those kinds of skills at that time. Bonnie talks about how in the early work she's both herself, but also sort of just seen as a sort of seated woman or a sort of elegantly attired woman. Then she starts, and not represented in this presentation, but having sort of other, what you call cultural costumes that she was wearing in certain pieces. So at one point she's working at Andy's Donuts, 24-hour diner in San Francisco. And she has on one hand a short order cook outfit that she chooses to wear while she's doing this work in real life. But then she also has a sort of 1965 era kind of bouffant waitress. So a sort of thinking of a kind of character, even though she was also, maybe those lines were being blurred in terms of people understanding them at the time. She even called just wearing a sort of tank top and jeans her travel costume, even though I think anyone seeing her would have just assumed that's what she was wearing in some of those performances from the mid-70s. So, you know, I never actually talked to Bonnie. I mean, we talked about the gown for sitting still, but not it throughout her career. And then later, just always thought of her whenever I saw her with, you know, again, yes, elegant hats, but also she had these amazing bakelite and other kind of bangles of different colors, and just wore color and beautiful lipstick, and just it was always a key aspect. There's no question, though, we see her in all of these projects with youth in, you know, jeans and a shirt. So it's not that, you know, this was something that she was always doing, but definitely loved seeing her just kind of celebration of color and life in the way that she then also just presented herself when she gave talks or when you would run into her at an opening. And scarves also, yeah.
Yeah, that look, you know, when you see someone dressed like that, you know, you really pause and you pay more attention to what they're doing and what they're saying.
Yeah. I mean, I think also, you know, I'm, you know, when she first came to the scene, it's, you know, she was in such a male-dominated art scene in the Bay Area. She's really among the first two sort of women artists performing in public spaces. And she would then become shown with a number of artists and in dialogue with other women artists. But I think that it's also this sort of cultural shift that's happening of someone who's growing up in a certain era of the 60s into then sort of later 60s, 70s feminist movement, women also wearing a very sort of different kind of clothing, but very much the kind of history of you know, sort of women's role and perspective. It was sort of, I don't want to say dismaying, but a lot of the early press for portable parks that we were reading was also very much focused on sort of the pretty sculptress, is the word sculptress that they used to describe her. And that, you know, one of her early awards, which is not necessarily based on beauty, but she was sort of Mademoiselle's among their sort of Women of the Year award. And so she gets flown out to the Waldorf Astoria, and it's there that she has a very fancy breakfast where, you know, with this big silver bonnet that they sort of take off. And that was a key kind of source of inspiration for then doing public lunch and having that catered.
Wow. Fantastic. Thank you.
Mary, you're muted.
I just, you know, Bonnie put another story in. She says, I remember a few occasions when Bonnie came to the Bernal school site on Halloween Day. It's a time when I had on, oh, wait a minute. I had on a costume and she encouraged me to dress as colorfully more often. So,
Yeah.
well,
Yeah, and I think, yeah, no, and Terry has a great point about you know, her costumes as also being sort of part of a feminist stance, which is a great point. I think in especially a lot of those earlier works as well. And Bonnie, even at one point when she was the waitress, costume takes that to perform jury duty, and inhabits that. And then many years later, also just spoke of more broadly the sort of cultural costumes we wear, and sometimes also her own contradiction as an artist of having to sort of negotiate and navigate these just different fields of non-art people, government agencies, et cetera, that you're working with, and sort of just, yeah, that kind of perception and understanding sort of both your interest in expanding a definition of what is art and who makes it, but also recognizing a certain kind of activity.
All right, well, on behalf of all of us, let's give you a full applaud for a wonderful, wonderful, wonderful presentation. And this recording will be on the WEED website within a couple of days. And thank those of you who are related, Frank, and let's see, some of the other folks who came who are connected with Bonnie, and wonderful. So Tanya, thank you very much. We really appreciate it. And we look forward to coming on the 9th, some of us, and learn more.
Well,
Yeah.
thank you so much for coming, and thank you everyone for your questions and for listening today, and also encourage you to follow the work A Living Library is doing, and also to check out our really beautiful catalog. There's just a lot of great perspectives and just images of Bonnie's work in there. And then a link for WEED.
Yes, okay, we'll put in the link for WEED and then we'll stop the recording. weedartist.org. And look for our new issue of the magazine. Susan's the editor and we have 2 guest editors, and they're about to publish it within a week or 2. All right,
Thank you, Mary. Thank you, everyone.
Manoush, did you turn the recording?